Have you ever thought that we're living in a simulation? What if everything you know is a lie? I've been thinking about that a lot this week, and you're in luck because today's episode, we're going to be talking about if we are living in a simulation, the ethical implications of living in a simulation, and what if everything we know is a lie? This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
So I have been thinking this week because games are getting so realistic.
Oh, dude, I just had this just
Okay.
had this conversation
So
with
I
you
was
the other
playing,
day too.
yeah, I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and could have
That's what
swore
she
I
was
was in the
playing.
Wild West. Okay. And then I was playing Sea of
Yo,
Thieves and I could have sworn I was a pirate. Like, it's getting so crazy realistic that it's like, how could we not be living in a simulation?
two things. A little digression. One, did you see the South Park episode about Red Dead Redemption
Ugh.
where the cop keeps wanting to? Oh my God, so good. They were totally playing the game. It was when it came out, and they were totally playing that week, and didn't want, like, you can tell. It's so funny. But anyway, yeah, dude, that game. Like I was saying that because Anna was playing the other day, and she'll go back and play it a lot because it's like you can just ride the horse around. It's like amazing,
Yeah.
but it's like literally immersive. The way
Mm.
they did that story and the characters, and like I was saying to her too the other day, I was thinking about because like virtual reality's even gotten very good. Like I tried the PlayStation VR 1. I haven't tried the 2, and that was pretty impressive. But imagine too, like if they could use AI, and I'm sure they will at some point for characters in games
Oh,
for more
yeah.
dynamic conversations, dude, we are going to get to a point, I think, where like when you read in sci-fi like about like the holodecks and stuff, where like there's this holographic represent. I don't see that being impossible at all. It's just a matter of technology catching up to that and processing power, which we're almost there already. So there's no reason like this was actually one of the arguments for the simulation was that we've come so far and think about when like Game Boy came out or Atari, right? We've come so far in that short time that there's no reason to think we haven't already gotten there. And there are people who believe that we've already gotten there and this is a simulation. That
Well,
that's the crazy part.
that's what I've been thinking about. There was some Alan Watts gave a talk. He's a philosopher. He has some pretty cool thoughts and stuff. And he gave a talk once about how like if you're a god, you essentially live forever. You can live unlimited lives. You're omnipotent. You can do whatever you want. And eventually you just do everything and then life gets boring. And so wouldn't it make sense for you to create a life where you're not all powerful, where you can't do everything? And it kind of like goes hand in hand with these video games. Because, I mean, you play a video game and you die, and so what? You just start over. And you can keep
Yeah.
on doing that. And you know that, like, you can just die as many times as you want. And eventually, if you just keep trying, you'll get there. But,
Yeah.
like,
You'll get whatever you're trying to aim at, right?
yeah, and we've seen the progression of video games getting much, much better. So essentially, in video games, we're like gods, and they're going to be to a point where we can't distinguish them real life from fake. So then, what if we already have had these like amazing simulation video games where it just got boring because we did everything in the video games, and then we're like, well, what happens if we just make a game where we can't do everything? And if we die in that game, we actually die. So, like
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
I
So,
mean, it's crazy when you think about it, it is because like there's no knowledge is interesting, right? Because like it feels like we really know the world in the day to day sometimes, and like things feel solid and certain. But as soon as you start to think about stuff, it falls apart really fast. Because you notice, like, most of the things people hold to be true, they're conventions or they're contrived. They're not even like based on anything. It's just opinion or interpretation. So it's like things just start to fall apart. And you realize too, I think the more you know how little we know about the universe, I mean about physics. I mean, we can't even explain dark matter, which we claim makes up like 90, what, like 5% of all matter or something. Like, we're missing quite a lot. So that's the other side of this too, I think that people forget is there's so much room of the unknown that it's like hard to know any of the answers to these, right? And to say with certainty. And how would you even know? I mean, think about that. There was a Robert Nozick, I think it was Nozick, had this famous thought experiment called the experience machine. And this was going back, but it's philosophy. And the idea was like, if you could build an experience machine, so think of it like the Matrix, basically. Like some machine you could plug into, have experiences, and they were indistinguishable from reality, from your waking life, or life outside the machine. What reason is there to prefer waking life over the machine or reality of the machine, right? And arguably, there's not really any because if you can't distinguish, you don't know which is which, right? And I mean, is there anything morally wrong? Like, so imagine if you had an experience machine and you could say, like, look, I could hook you up. You'll have a great life. Here's what'll happen. We could even plan it out if you want, whatever, and it'll feel real. Like, is there anything wrong with choosing that? I don't know.
Yeah,
Probably not.
it's interesting because, you know, along those same lines, like ethically and morally, if we are living in a simulation, does that change things? Because, if this is real life, then, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal, you
If it's
shouldn't
a video
lie.
game, you should kill
But
constantly and steal.
right? If that's what's in the best thing to win the video game, it might make sense. So it might change the boundaries of ethics and morality and all of this stuff.
It could. I mean, the other question is, would it? I mean, there's always the other interesting thing is like, would it matter? Like, if it is a simulation and we knew it was one, would the morality even matter at all? And I think that's another interesting question because what's funny is like I know people who will play games like Red Dead and they'll play, how, like your
Yeah.
decisions change the game, right?
Hmm.
And so they'll intentionally play good because they don't want to screw people over. They don't want to steal. They don't want to hurt people. Like they'll kill when they have to, obviously, because you have to at certain points in the game. You can't get around it. But it's interesting to see them impose these moral standards on themselves, even within the game. And that's not even a simulation. So I wonder if because it's like you're still acting, right? So you're still responsible, even if it's a simulation, you're still making choices. So does that still have that bearing of morality then,
Yeah.
or the weight of morality?
It's an interesting one because I was kind of having an argument about somebody about like why there's this whole war on drugs and it's just like, well, just make all the drugs legal and then the war on drugs is over. And it's
But
like,
then the
no, if you
pharmaceutical companies won't make hundreds of billions of dollars.
well, their argument was like, well, no, if you do that, then people will go around doing all types of drugs. And I'm like, well, if all the drugs are legal, are you going to go around and do all these types of drugs? And I'm like, no, I would never do that. And it's like, so what? You're just like morally superior than everybody else, and like
Yeah.
you're this righteous person, and everybody else is a low life, and just like, yeah, there's,
I think most people wouldn't change how they act at all,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And it's funny because people are like, well, so many people, since marijuana was legalized in many states, people are like, it's like, well, we already had many surveys that suggested that over 70% of US people already used it. So it's like, there's been no shift
yeah.
in
The
the
only
usage
thing,
of
there's
it
just less people in prison now.
for stupid things. Yeah.
Yeah,
For nonviolent stuff. Yeah. It's
yeah,
like, it's ridiculous. No, I agree with you. But
yeah.
it's funny. It's like, and I think this raises interesting questions about how we think of our actions and how we think of like morality in general. Like, is it, does it matter if, I guess, does it matter if I know the situation's real or not? If I'm making a choice, do I still have responsibility to make a choice a certain way?
Well, yeah, that's a really interesting one. Like, would you act differently if you were living in a simulation, and how can you prove that you're not?
Well, that's the difficulty, right?
So, like, what's his name? Scott Adams, the guy who wrote Dilbert. He wrote a
Yeah.
couple books that I read, and he believes that we're living in a simulation, and he acts accordingly. And apparently, so does Elon Musk, and they're both pretty successful, at least financially. And
Well,
so,
yeah. The guy that made Dilbert, totally fine with.
yeah,
Not necessarily that much.
yeah.
Wouldn't choose that, but successful, yes. That's fine, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Financially, they're doing pretty well. So maybe that's the key to
I wonder
financial
if that's a
success is
just,
just,
well, I wonder if it's a justification for the decisions they make to be financially successful. People like Elon Musk, these ultra wealthy who, many of their decisions screw people over regularly, you know, hurt people all the time. So maybe it's a way to kind of morally justify it themselves too.
you're like, oh, they're just an NPC. It doesn't
Well, that's what
matter.
I mean. Yeah, like a rationalization, right? Like if you don't think this is real, then, that's a good rationalization for my actions don't matter, right?
Mm,
But you can
uh,
still argue they do, though, because look, even if it's a simulation, you're still affecting other people's simulations, right? So
yeah,
you still are having, look, I mean, I don't know, arguably, if we were all in a simulation and we had this some level of freedom in our actions still, kind of like Matrixy style, like we might be scripted, but there's some freedom. So we still have responsibility. Arguably, there's no difference. I don't know if there is a difference, ethically speaking,
yeah,
because you're still screwing people over. You're still, whatever your argument is for value, it still should apply, I think. regardless of whether, and that's if we know we're in a simulation, which we can't prove, which also makes it hard, you know?
Yeah, like I mean, I had a super realistic dream the other night, and I could have sworn the dream was real, and then I woke up and I was so confused because it wasn't real.
Dude,
Or
that's the worst.
yeah, and
When you wake up and for like 5 seconds, you can't figure out like what's going on and you're not sure. And then
yeah,
the worst is when it's a really positive thing and you're like, damn it, didn't happen.
the pot of gold isn't underneath my bed. Damn.
Could have sworn there was a leprechaun there.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
So
I
I guess it comes back to what is real.
I don't know. It's crazy though, because it's like, I was reading something the other day where they thought I forget, I can't remember the exact article, the scientific article, but they were talking about how like, and I've heard this theory before where black holes, the other side of a black hole might be like another universe. There is this theory that exists where like, because all that matter is going in there, right? And that would create new space. So like another dimension basically, or another bubble of reality. And if you think about that, that's insane. Like think about how many black holes there are,
Yeah.
right? And like, I don't know, it's just kind of like if that is true, that would be, I mean, nuts. And if anything, like if any of these like larger theoretical science stuff is true, I mean, how do we grapple with our experience if there's multiple dimensions or if there's multiple universes or if there's, how do we even grapple with the here and now? And how much does it matter? If something similar is happening, over and over and all these, does this even matter at all?
That's a very good question. And it's so hard. You ever have that experience? Like, especially, I get it, especially when I'm tired. Like, I'll get it a lot at night where things just don't seem real anymore. Like, I'm so confused. I get like confused
I get
with
that
life and yeah,
all the time now, dude.
yeah,
Because it's like, it just doesn't, there's so many times throughout the day where like things just don't seem like this is how I thought it was gonna I guess how I thought it was gonna play out. This is so far removed from how I thought it was gonna play out that it's like, is this real? Is
yeah.
something wrong? How
And
do
then I get
people,
some sleep and everything's right again.
well, everything's just, you're ready to accept it, I guess, right? But I always wonder that. I'm like, how do people just accept this? You know?
No
Because there's a
choice.
level of, yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Yeah, I don't know.
So everything you know is a lie, and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So there you have it. That's our episode on Are We Living in a Simulation? It's getting more and more likely that we are. And man, freaking crazy. Because I also want like I also contemplate like what happens when people die? Like,
No
yeah,
idea.
it's just so weird. They're just like here and then they're not. And it's just yeah, so
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, I mean, there's still, your effects are still here, though.
Not
You
for
know,
a
you
limited
still,
time.
yeah, you still influence people. They still influence people. I mean, you're still, if even if nothing happens, you're still recycled. Your
Yeah.
matter's still here. I mean, I
Hmm.
think we never really go away, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so anyways, that's the topic on Are We Living in a Simulation? If you enjoyed it, you can always let us know if you have ideas for episodes. You can either post a comment down in the videos or you can email us in the show notes as our email. Until next time, this is the Essential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.